The auction house smelled like metal and sweat. Aliens from all over the galaxy gathered in a wide, dark hall. Bright lights shined down on a raised platform. One by one, slaves were brought out in chains. Bidders shouted numbers, some laughing, some yawning. At the edge of the stage stood two girls. They were the last ones left. One stood still, her head down, arms wrapped around herself. She looked soft, small, like a lost kitten. The other girl snarled, her wrists tied tight eyes. Wild and burning, she looked ready to bite anyone who got close. No bids? "Come on, gentlemen," the auctioneer called, his voice sharp. "These two are special, even if a little strange." The crowd gave no answer. Some looked away, others just shook their heads. "They're broken," someone said. "Too soft," said another, pointing at the quiet girl. "And that one's too wild," a third laughed, watching the angry one fight her cuffs. "They're not worth feeding." The auctioneer sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Fine, final offer. Take both for the price of one," he said. Still, no one raised a hand, no one moved. The hall fell quiet, then the sound of boots echoed through the room. A human walked forward. He looked young, maybe mid-20s, with a brown coat and dust on his boots. He had no fancy armor, no royal badge, no weapons showing. Just calm eyes and a worn-out satchel slung over his shoulder. He looked up at the two girls. The soft one met his eyes for just a second, then quickly looked away, shaking. The wild one growled at him, baring her sharp teeth. But he didn't flinch. "I'll take them," he said, his voice low but steady. The whole crowd turned toward him. The auctioneer blinked, then laughed nervously. "You want both?" "Yes," the human said, pulling a small bag from his satchel. "Here's the payment." "You must be joking," a trader in the crowd said. "Why waste money on junk?" But the human ignored them. He handed the credits to the auctioneer, then walked up to the platform. The soft girl stepped back as he came close. Her hands trembled, and her eyes stayed on the floor. The wild girl yanked her chains, ready to attack. "Easy," he said, calmly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The guards handed him the chains. He took them gently, not pulling or yanking. Instead, he turned around and began walking. "Come," he said, simply. At first, they didn't move. Then slowly, the soft girl followed, walking like a scared shadow. The wild one hissed but followed too, eyes watching every step. No one in the hall spoke. They just stared as the strange human led them away. Outside, the sun was bright, and the market buzzed with noise. The human didn't look back. He walked with steady steps, through dirty streets, past vendors and stairs. The girls behind him, one silent, one angry, moved like ghosts. After a while, they reached a small transport parked near the edge of town. It wasn't new or fast, but it looked strong. He opened the back door and nodded. "You can rest inside," he said. The soft girl crawled in quietly, curling up in a corner. The wild girl stood outside for a while. Glaring, she looked ready to run, but something about the human made her stop. She finally stepped in, sitting as far from him as possible. He didn't chain them again. He didn't lock the door. He just started the engine, and they flew off into the endless sky. Inside the ship, there was no talking, only the hum of the engine and quiet breathing. The soft girl peeked up at him once. He smiled at her, just a little, then looked forward again. The wild girl crossed her arms and looked out the window, but her eyes softened just a little. She didn't growl anymore. She didn't try to escape that night. They landed in a quiet place, a small cabin hidden in trees, far from cities and crowds. He made them simple food and gave them clean blankets. The soft girl stared at the bowl for a long time before eating. The wild girl sniffed it first, then took a bite, slowly. He didn't ask them questions. He didn't touch them. He just said, "You're safe here." Then let them rest. As the stars blinked in the sky above, the two girls lay in silence, one curled like a leaf, the other still tense, but neither of them ran, neither of them cried, and for the first time in a long time, they felt something strange in their hearts. Not fear, but maybe Hope, asterisk. The cabin was quiet, too quiet sometimes. The human didn't mind it. But the silence from the soft alien girl was different. She never spoke, never asked for anything. She only followed him. Always a few steps behind. She moved like a shadow, gentle, silent, and easy to forget. He noticed she never looked him in the eye for long. She ate slowly, as if waiting for the food to disappear. She flinched every time a door closed. She never slept deeply, always waking with the slightest noise. The wild girl was loud and angry. She shouted sometimes, argued with birds, and growled at the wind. But the soft one, she kept her words hidden deep inside. It was like her voice had been stolen long ago. Or maybe no one had ever asked to hear it. One day, the human left an old music box on the table. It was small and a bit broken, but still worked if you turned the key just right. He didn't say anything about it. Just placed it there and walked away. Later that evening, he found the soft girl sitting near it. Her hands hovered above it, like she was afraid to touch it. He stood by the door, watching quietly. She reached for the key and turned it. A soft tune began to play, something slow and sweet. Her eyes widened a little. She stared at the music box like it was magic. She didn't notice him watching. She leaned in close, her lips moved. But no sound came out. Then after a few seconds, one word escaped her mouth. Safe. He froze, not wanting to scare her, but inside. Something twisted in his chest, not because the word was small, but because it was the first sound she'd ever made. She touched the music box again, and this time she whispered two more words. Thank you, he smiled, not too wide, not too fast. He just nodded once and said softly, You're welcome. After that day, things started to change. She didn't talk much, but she no longer avoided his eyes. She helped clean the cabin without being asked. She began sitting closer to him during meals. One night, he found her standing outside, staring at the stars. He walked over and stood beside her. You like the sky? He asked. She nodded slowly. My planet had no stars, she whispered. He didn't ask more. He just looked up with her. Sometimes, silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The wild girl noticed the change. She stopped calling the soft one useless. They still didn't talk much, but there was less tension, less fear in the air. The soft girl still jumped at loud sounds, still curled up in a ball when she slept. But one night, during a thunderstorm, she ran to his room. He was already awake, sitting on the floor, without a word. She sat beside him, wrapping her arms around her knees. He didn't move, didn't speak, but slowly. Her shoulder touched his, just a little, just enough to feel less alone. The storm passed, but she stayed, and when morning came, she was still there, eyes closed, breathing steady. He cooked breakfast, and when he placed her bowl on the table, she said it again. Thank you. That day, he left the door open a little longer. Let the sun come in. Let the breeze pass through. He wasn't sure if they were healing. But something was growing, something quiet and warm. He found a book with pictures and gave it to her. She spent hours turning the pages, tracing the images with her fingers, flowers, stars, animals, water. She stared at them like they were treasures. She pointed at a picture of a tree once, then at the forest outside. Same, she said softly. He laughed a little. Yes, same, and just like that, she began speaking one word at a time. Not full sentences, just pieces, but each word was like a small step forward, a sign that she was still alive inside. At night, she still kept close to her corner, but her body was no longer tight with fear, and sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she hummed the song from the music box. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't loud, but it was hers, and the human, sitting nearby with a quiet heart, knew she was finally beginning to find her voice again. The wild girl didn't trust anything, not the cabin, not the food, and especially not the human. She didn't sleep when he slept. She only closed one eye at a time, always watching, always waiting. Every time he turned his back, she counted his steps. Every time he left the door open, she looked at the trees. She tested the locks at night, felt the wood walls, studied the windows. She was planning, not for comfort, not for peace, just for freedom. The soft girl had changed. She started to speak, started to smile, but the wild one only grew more restless. She said the human was playing a trick, sighed no one gives safety for free, said no man is ever truly kind. The human never stopped her. When she growled, he stepped back. When she refused food, he didn't force it. When she shouted, he simply listened. He treated her like a storm, dangerous, but never hated. One evening, the rain poured hard. The wind slammed against the cabin like fists, while the soft girl sat reading in a corner. The wild one made her move. The window in the storage room had a broken latch. She slipped through it like a shadow. Her feet hit the wet ground and didn't stop. She ran, not caring where, just away from the cabin, from the man, from the strange warmth she didn't understand. The forest swallowed her whole. Branches tore at her arms. Mud soaked her legs. But she felt alive, wild, free. She didn't stop until her chest burned and her knees shook. She found a dark cave, cold and empty, and curled up inside it. There. She waited for her body to stop shaking, waited for the voices in her head to stop screaming. But the forest was not silent like the cabin. The forest was hungry. Something growled nearby. A real animal, sharp teeth, glowing eyes. She bared her own teeth in return. She fought. Claws against claws, screams against howls, and when it ended, she limped, bleeding, through the dark. She had escaped the man, but found something worse, being alone. Not alone like before, alone like forgotten. Like dead. Hours passed, maybe more. She didn't know how long it took to return. But when she saw the light from the cabin window again, she hated herself. She stood there, just outside the door, soaked in blood and shame, expecting chains, expecting shouting, expecting cold eyes. But the door opened before she knocked. The human stood there, silent. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't ask, "Why did you run?" He just looked at her injuries, stepped aside and said, "Come in." She didn't speak. She stepped inside. Shaking, dripping mud on the floor, he brought a towel, warm water, and bandages. She pushed him at first, weak claws trying to scratch. But he just waited. She finally sat down, letting him clean the wounds. The soft girl came out quietly. She placed a bowl of soup on the table. The wild girl didn't touch it at first. Then she did, slowly, with shaking fingers. Later that night, the human sat by the fire. He looked at the wild girl, who lay wrapped in a blanket. "I knew you'd leave," he said softly. "I just hoped you'd come back." She stared at the flames, confused, angry, tired. "No one lets a beast return," she whispered. "You're not a beast," he said. "You're someone who's been hurt." She didn't answer, but for the first time, she didn't argue. Didn't growl, didn't fight. The next morning she stayed. She sat at the table without being told. She ate her food without looking over her shoulder. She still didn't trust fully, but something had cracked when he went out to chop wood. She followed, not to run, not to spy, but to help. She carried a few logs, grumbling the whole way. "You're not strong," she said to him. He smiled. "That's why I need help." She rolled her eyes, but carried more anyway. Something in her had changed. Not like the soft girl's change, slow and peaceful. Hers was louder, harder, but real. And though she would never say it out loud, she didn't feel like a prisoner anymore. She felt like someone being allowed to choose. And for now, she chose to stay. Asterisk. The nights in the cabin were colder than they looked. Not because of the weather, but because of the memories that filled the air. The soft girl always wrapped herself in a blanket, curled tightly in the corner. Her eyes would close, but her hands stayed clenched, even in sleep. She looked afraid of something. She never asked for comfort. She never made a sound while awake, but one night, something changed. The human was sitting by the fireplace, fixing an old heater. The wild girl had already fallen asleep with her arm over her eyes. Then, a sound broke the quiet. It was soft, like a whimper, then another, louder. It came from the soft girl. She twisted in her sleep, her lips moved, and tears ran down her face. Then the cries came, small, broken sounds like a child trapped in a nightmare. Her whole body shook as she whispered words that didn't make sense. No, ... Not again, ... please. Don't take me. The human didn't speak. He didn't rush to her. He simply stood and walked over. He sat down beside her, not too close, just near enough so she wouldn't be alone when she woke up. The wild girl opened one eye and watched. She didn't say anything either. She saw the human place a folded blanket near the soft girl, saw him reach out his hand, then stop. He didn't touch her. He let her decide when she was ready. The cries faded slowly. Her body stopped shaking, and then, like a flower turning toward the sun, she leaned toward him. Not fully awake, not fully asleep. Her head rested against his arm. She didn't open her eyes, but she sighed, like someone who had been holding their breath for too long. He stayed like that, not moving, for hours. He sat beside her while the fire crackled low. He watched the stars through the window. He listened to the soft girl's breathing grow calm. He didn't need to say anything. Some wounds weren't ready for words. When morning came, she woke up first. Her eyes opened slowly. Then she realized where her head was resting. She pulled away fast, her face full of panic. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely there. He shook his head gently. "No need to be sorry," he said. "You were scared." She lowered her eyes. Then after a long pause, she asked, "Why didn't you move away?" He looked at her carefully. "Because I wanted you to know it's okay to need someone." She didn't answer, but her hands stopped shaking. The wild girl made a noise from her blanket. "Ooh, feelings," she muttered, stretching her arms. But she didn't sound annoyed, not really. Later that day, the soft girl followed the human outside. She didn't say much, just watched him fix the water pump. Then, without warning, she handed him a tool before he asked. He smiled and said, "Thank you." She gave a small nod. Not quite a smile, but almost. The wild girl leaned against the cabin wall, arms crossed. "She's waking up," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Yeah," he replied. "She is." That evening, the soft girl surprised everyone. She picked up the old music box and wound it up. Then she placed it near the fire and whispered, "I used to have one before everything." The wild girl blinked. "You remember?" The soft girl nodded slowly. "Not all, just pieces." She touched her chest with a small hand. "But the bad parts still follow me." The human sat down nearby. "They'll follow," he said, "until you face them." The wild girl laughed, once dry and sharp, and punched them in the face. The soft girl looked at her and smiled a real smile, small, shy, but real. The fire burned low again that night. And this time, the soft girl didn't curl up in the corner. She sat on a cushion near the others, still quiet, still small, but no longer alone. When the lights dimmed and the stars came out, the wild girl threw a blanket at the soft one. "Here, before you freeze to death." She grumbled. The soft girl giggled. And that sound was the most surprising thing of all. The human leaned back in his chair. He didn't need to speak. He just watched as something beautiful unfolded. Not fast, not loud, but slow and warm, like spring melting the snow. She always said she didn't care about him, said he was weak, soft, a fool, said the soft girl was wasting her time, but her eyes always followed him. Every time he stepped outside, she noticed. Every time he spoke gently to the soft one, her ears twitched, and when he was late returning one day, she waited by the door without knowing why. The forest was quiet that morning, too quiet. The soft girl was painting something on the cabin wall with berry juice. The wild girl watched the trees, arms crossed, jaw tight. Then she saw the human returning, but he wasn't alone. 3 men followed him, big, armored and armed. Their voices were loud, laughter cruel. They shoved him toward the cabin. One pointed at the door. Inside now, the soft girl froze in place, brush still in her hand. The wild girl stepped in front of her before she even realized it. The human's eyes met theirs. and he gave the smallest shake of his head. But it was too late. One of the strangers stepped forward. "Nice little house you got," he sneered. "And those two girls heard you picked them up cheap." "We're here to collect," another said, tapping the side of his blaster. "They were never yours, you know." The wild girl didn't growl this time. She didn't shout. She just moved fast. Before the men could blink, she was on the first one. Claws out, fangs bared, he screamed. As she knocked him down, the blaster flew into the bushes. The second man swung a metal rod at her. It hit her shoulder hard, but she didn't stop. The human yelled, "No! Stop, don't kill them!" But she didn't listen, not this time. They had come to take her back, to hurt the soft girl, to hurt him. She fought like a storm, wild and unchained. The third man grabbed the soft girl, pulling her back. That was when the human stepped in. He tackled the man from behind, fists swinging. He didn't have claws or armor, but he had fire. The attackers finally ran. Bleeding and bruised, one shouted, "You'll regret this." As they limped into the trees, the wild girl stood still, breathing hard. Her shoulder bled, her arms ached, but her eyes never left the human. He knelt beside the soft girl, checking her for injuries. She was shaken, but safe. The wild girl didn't speak. She just walked over and sat on the ground. He turned to her slowly. "Why did you fight them?" he asked. She looked at him like it was a stupid question. "They touched what's mine," she said, then added, "The cabin, the soft one." "You," he blinked, surprised. The soft girl came closer and placed a hand on the wild girl's arm. "You protected us," she whispered. The wild girl shrugged. "Doesn't mean I like you," she muttered. But her voice had no bite. That night, the cabin was quiet again. The wild girl sat near the fire with her injured arm wrapped in cloth. The human handed her warm tea. She took it without looking at him, then said, "You should have hit harder." "I'm not a fighter," he replied. "Then it's a good thing I am," she said, sipping the tea. The soft girl sat between them, holding her drawing. It was of the cabin, with three figures standing together, one soft, one wild, and one human. She showed it to them without speaking. The wild girl stared at it, then looked away quickly. "They'll come back," she said, voice low. "Maybe," the human replied, "but we'll be ready." She looked at him again. "You'll fight with me next time?" "I'll try," he said with a small smile. "Good," she muttered. "You're bad at it, but I like the effort." For the first time she laughed, not loud, not cruel, just real. The fire crackled, and the tea grew cold. But inside the cabin, something stronger burned. Not just survival, not just escape, but a bond made through blood, fire, and choice. She had been wild, untamed, angry, but now she had chosen something else, to fight, not just for herself, but for them. It started with a creak, a floorboard near the back of the cabin that gave away too easily. The wild girl noticed it first, her sharp senses catching the sound. She pressed her foot down again, and the board bent lower. Without a word, she crouched and dug her claws. Under the edge, the soft girl came over, watching with wide eyes. Underneath, they found a small trapdoor, hidden by dust and time. It wasn't locked, just forgotten. The wild girl hesitated, then pulled it open. A cool draft rose up from the dark below, carrying a scent of metal and ash. "Should we go in?" the soft girl asked, voice barely above a whisper. "He never told us about this." The wild girl didn't answer. She just grabbed a lamp and stepped into the shadow. The soft girl followed, her heart beating fast. The space below was small and silent. Old boxes lined the walls, some rusted shut, others marked with strange symbols. There were no windows, just shelves filled with folded uniforms, pictures, and worn-out weapons. In the center was a case made of glass. Inside it lay a photo, faded but untouched. Two little girls stood smiling beside the human. Their skin was pale, their hair light, their eyes kind. The soft girl stepped closer. "That's him," she said. "And those girls," she added, "they look like..." His daughters, the wild girl finished for her, voice flat. Beside the photo lay a medal, and a patch that read, Galactic Peacekeeper Honor Guard. There were burned letters, warning reports, old messages stored in tiny data chips. Some had the seal of planets long destroyed. Others mentioned missions where entire villages were saved, alien villages. Their kind, he had fought for people like them, and somewhere along the way, he had lost everything. Footsteps echoed above them. The trapdoor opened, and the human looked down. At first, his face didn't change. Then he sighed and climbed down slowly. I was going to tell you one day, he said quietly. Guess today came early. The soft girl looked at him, eyes filled with a strange sadness. Why didn't you say anything? He sat on a nearby crate, rubbing his hands together. I didn't want pity, he said. And I didn't want you to think I took you in just to fill a hole. The wild girl crossed her arms. But you lost them, she said. Your daughters. He nodded. They were taken during a raid, the same kind of raid that took both of you. Silence hung in the air, heavy and cold. The soft girl stepped back, unsure of what she was feeling. The wild girl looked away. Her jaw was tight, her fingers twitching. You saw them in us, the wild one said. That's why you helped. Yes, he admitted. At first. But then it became about you, he added quickly. About who you are, not who I lost. He looked up at them. I'm not trying to replace anyone, he said. I just didn't want to lose more people who didn't deserve to be broken. The soft girl reached for the photo. Her fingers brushed the glass. They were beautiful, she whispered. The wild girl didn't speak. She turned and climbed out of the hidden room. She didn't slam the door, but she closed it slowly. The soft girl followed, leaving the human alone with memories. Outside, the wind had picked up. The wild girl stood by the tree line, staring into the distance. He didn't lie, the soft girl said. No, the wild one replied. But he didn't trust us either. They stood in silence for a while. Then the wild girl added, but I'd rather be seen as someone's memory than as no one at all. That night, they didn't talk much during dinner. The human didn't push. He served them quietly, stayed at the far side of the table. The soft girl watched him for a long time, then finally said, Do you miss them? Every day? He looked up slowly. Every day, he answered. But now when I look at you both, I don't feel pain, I feel purpose again. The wild girl scoffed. That's the softest thing you've ever said. He gave a small smile. Then I'm in good company. The fire crackled as the soft girl hummed her usual tune. The wild girl leaned back in her chair. Not leaving, not hiding. They didn't fully understand him yet, but for the first time, they understood why he saw beauty in them when no one else had. Not because they reminded him of someone lost, but because they were worth being found. They were no longer strangers to the cabin. The walls had heard laughter now, not just silence. The floor creaked under dancing feet, not scared footsteps. The soft girl smiled more often. Her voice soft but steady. She started humming while making food, even singing small alien songs that had no words. The wild girl still grumbled, still rolled her eyes. But when the human coughed one morning, she dropped her tough act and shoved tea into his hands. It had been months, but the change wasn't just in the cabin, it was in them. They sat at the table like they belonged there, not like guests, not like rescued pets, but like family. One morning, a group of travelers passed through the nearby forest. They came in peace, looking for food and shelter. The human welcomed them politely, but the moment one man looked too long at the soft girl, the wild one stood up. She placed a hand on her knife, not to attack, just to remind. The message was clear. These two aren't for sale. The travelers left gifts and moved on, whispering that the human was strange. They said the girls followed him like daughters, not slaves, that they had seen one of them touch his shoulder and laugh, that the wild one had called him something strange, old man. With a crooked grin, later that night by the fire, the human sat quietly. He was carving something out of wood. The soft girl leaned over to see. It was a little figure, rough and simple. It looked like her. He handed it to her and smiled. "No reason," he said. She held it like it was made of stars. The wild girl scoffed. "Where's mine?" He pointed to the second figure on the table, this one with wild hair and angry eyes. She laughed, actually laughed. "Better look scared too," she said. He chuckled. "I ran out of wood." The three of them sat there for a while, warm in the glow of fire and quiet moments. No chains, no yelling, no fear, only peace. One evening, the soft girl found an old book of Earth customs. She read about names, how humans gave them to people they loved. Names that meant something. She brought the book to the human and asked, "Do we have names?" He blinked, surprised. "No one gave you one before?" She shook her head. "They called me Asset 42, the wild girl added. "I was Unit Redclaw." The human sat still for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. He pointed to the soft girl. "You're Luma," he said. "It means light." She smiled like the sun had touched her heart. Then he looked at the wild girl. "You're Kale," he said. "It means fire." Kale looked away, but her ears were red. "Sounds dumb," she muttered. But she didn't reject it, not even a little. From that night on, Luma hummed louder. And Kale stopped calling the human, "Hey, old fool." She started calling him, "Pa," but only when she thought no one was listening. They built a small garden behind the cabin, planted alien flowers from Luma's memories, set up wood targets for Kale to throw her knives, and even painted the outside walls with shapes and stars. People began to talk about them, how the strange human and his two alien girls had turned a forgotten cabin into a home. One day, a visitor came, an official from a nearby town. He asked questions, looked around. He said the girls didn't belong to anyone legally, that without papers, they could still be taken. The human stared him down, then said, "They carry my name now." The man laughed. "You adopted them?" "Yes," the human replied. "Any problem with that?" The visitor left quickly, and the girls stared at him in silence. "You really mean that?" Luma asked. "You don't have to pretend," Kale said, voice low. "I'm not pretending," he replied. "You're my daughters, if you want to be." Luma ran to him and hugged him tightly. Kale stood still, arms crossed, but her voice shook when she finally said, "I guess that makes me your problem now." He placed a hand on her head. Gladly, they were once sold and forgotten once, called too soft and too wild, but now they stood with heads high, because someone saw their truth, not what they had been, but who they chose to become, not property, not projects, family.